So once you've signed up for the tool, you'll come to this portion here where you'll get a download email for the tool directly to your email. It'll be just by our generic automated email here from discovery@block64.com. So you may have to check your junk folder or any spam folder in case the automated email has been put there. Otherwise, you just click this link here. It'll get you the latest version of the tool directly from your browser. It'll just begin the download in your browser there. I've already got it downloaded here, so I will just open that up. And once you've got the tool open here, the installation is going to choose this default location just in program files. I would not change this location as it may interfere with the installation of the application and the way the application is going to map its folders. So I'll just leave the default location. You can hit next here. This is just a license agreement. You can read through this and just hit next. And this portion is covering basically endpoint protection and antivirus. If you have any of these softwares installed, they may interfere with the inventory process. So we would just click whichever link is relevant to you, and you can set up your whitelisting based on your antivirus software. And once you've acknowledged that, you can hit next. This portion is additional as well. We have the ports listed here. So these are the ports that we need access to for Windows inventory, as well as Linux and VMware inventory. So you have your network security requirements that you can open here, direct link to our wiki. Same thing here with our Windows Firewall GPO. So once you've gone through this pre-work, if you've not already got this implemented, this is just another checkpoint to get these rules implemented, and then once you've agreed to that, you can hit next. And then the tool will just go through the installation process at this point. It's just going to be a progress bar a few times here, and I will just skip forward to the application installed at this point. Okay, so now that the application is installed, we'll just click Finish here. And it should open up automatically. Otherwise, you can click the desktop logo to open it otherwise. And once you come to the dashboard of the application, it'll ask you to enter the email that you signed up with previously. So this should be the email that you registered your customer with. So I will enter mine here. It'll actually validate that this email is registered. And then what it'll do is send you a code just discreetly to your email, and that'll just validate that you are the person that signed up for the tool so that there's no issues there. And once you get to the screen, you can choose a simple setup or the custom. The only differences are the custom setup, you're going to be able to enter your virtual infrastructure email or your virtual infrastructure IP address, as well as the Dynamics Great Plains information. If you don't need those two right away, you can always enter them in the settings afterward, which I'll show you. Otherwise, you can do the simple setup, which I'll do now, which is a little bit easier as it's all in one screen for you there. So once you go to the simple setup here, you're basically going to go through the main settings all in this single screen. So the first thing will be your inventory scope. It'll automatically grab the subnet that your host machine is on. Otherwise, you can add another one, which I'll do here just for example. And then once you've got your subnets added, you can also add them by a file as well. And you can also add exclusions. So I'll add an exclusion just from one of these subnets. Just for an example here, we'll exclude the gateway. And this will say added exclusions. And then to view it, you can just expand it here to see what your exclusions are. And once you've got your subnets added, you can close this window. The domain controller, you can add yours here. And once you validate that, it'll actually give you a green check mark here to test against your domain controller and validate your credential. You don't actually have to hit anything. Once you enter your password fully here, it'll automatically start the verification process. And then what you want to do is also validate your 365. So my email's already accepted the agreement, so that's why it's just given us all 3 checks here. Otherwise, it'll pop up with an external window to just log into your MFA or whichever Microsoft login you may have set up for your 365 or your Azure portal. And then you just accept the agreement there from Block64 just to get read-only access to your data. And then we're able to accept that agreement directly from the application here. And then once we've got the information added, everything is green, we can hit go. And this will basically start the inventory process. So up here, you'll see the subnet that's currently being scanned. You can pause and unpause the inventory from this button here. And as well, the inventory progress will be shown on the dashboard here. So you'll get your devices inventoried from your Active Directory listed here. Overall devices inventory are listed here. Up here you have your on-demand inventory, your help page, and then your settings. So in the settings, since we do actually have a virtual infrastructure to add, we can go here. So you have network, Active Directory, and then here in inventory scope, if you scroll all the way down, you'll see vCenters here, and we can add our management server. And then once you've added the IP address here, there's no validation at this point. What we want to do is actually go to credentials here, and we can add a credential for the virtual infrastructure. Now, if you have a local user account, you can leave the domain field empty, like I'm going to do here. Since I just have a local administrator account, I will just add the root credentials. Otherwise, if you have a domain attached to your vCenter or VMware host, you can add your domain here. Otherwise, you can just leave it blank. So since it's a local account, it's going to run the validation against the virtual infrastructure, and we get the green check mark there again, which is perfect. So that it's validated this credential is able to log in with read-only access or better on that virtual host. And then once we go to the dashboard here, it's going to basically begin the inventory process, scanning those subnets that we've added. If you want to actually see the inventory progress and the IPs that are being scanned, you can actually click into either of these numbers here. And you can see you get the little hand symbol here. So if you click into here, you'll actually see the IPs that are being scanned as they start to populate. Your Active Directory data will fill in here as it populates. Entra ID data will populate here. And then utilization, this will be all your devices that are successfully inventoried. You'll start to gather the utilization data, and it'll basically give you a collection status of collected or not collected throughout the process of picking up the utilization, which every 2 hours or so, it should pick up a RAM, CPU, and disk usage data point. And those will be recorded in the application and then uploaded to the Combine Analytics portal every hour as the tool uploads the inventory data as well. So this tab will be mostly useful as well because all the inventory devices will be listed here. So if you want to just check all your inventory devices, you can just go to this utilization tab. It'll show every single device that's successfully inventoried. The Systems tab will show you all the IP addresses that have been scanned along with the status messages. So the status could be inventoried or failed or any sort of error message. Those will all be listed here in the Systems tab. The Active Directory and the Entra ID, these are mostly just to give you an idea of how many devices we're expecting, which devices are in the Active Directory, which devices are in the Entra ID, and those will be just for reference in terms of inventory progress for you. The actual devices being scanned and inventoried will be listed in the Systems tab here. So you should see all your subnets start populating here slowly. And then as the inventory progress moves forward, you can close this window and you should see your inventories start to rack up on the dashboard here. Now, once you've got the tool deployed in inventorying, there's a couple other tools you can use here as well. So you have your Active Directory percentage. This will basically give you an idea of how many devices are in your AD versus what is successfully inventoried. So it'll give you a percentage of your Active Directory that's been successfully inventoried. Up here we have this on-demand button, and also inside here we have this on-demand button. This is basically to do a manual inventory against any device. So for example, my domain controller here, I will manually run the inventory against it here, just as a test to show you. And it'll basically ping the machine, make sure we're able to contact the IP address. Whether it's in the subnet or it's outside the subnet, if you enter a manual IP address, it'll be able to ping it here and test that we have connectivity to it. It'll do a port check to check for those ports that we had allowed access to earlier. So mainly 135, 139, 445, and then some of these higher zones for WMI access. And then it will give you actually a printout of your inventory summary here. So it'll give you a check of RPC, WMI, SMB access, WinRM access as well. So if you get all three OKs and green check marks, that means you have access to all the protocols that are required. And then it will actually go through and do the inventory process of the software and hardware inventory, and it'll print out those results here as well. If there's any error messages, it'll print out the error message to let you know exactly what's going on in terms of if ports are blocked or any sort of issues. You can actually go to the dashboard and go to that help button that's up here, and that'll take you to our wiki page, where you can also get our interpreting error messages article and other articles for whitelisting or remediating any sort of errors that are happening on the application. And once it's completed, you should get a result like this. So all three protocols we have access to, the inventory was successful, and it'll just print out some of the hardware and software details, just to give you an example that the inventory was successful here. And then it'll say inventoried in the status here, as well as these other machines have started to become automatically inventoried as well. So you'll see those listed here. It'll start recording the operating systems. In the utilization, they'll start collecting utilization data. And same thing, these other tabs should start to fill out as well. So you can see my overall inventory count is raised up here. We're just waiting for the AD to get inventoried. This can take some time. It usually runs only a few times a day, so within 24 hours you should have this data populated as well. Now in the settings here, I'll quickly go over just the different settings that you can customize. So we have the network settings that we set up originally in the simple setup. You can also upload files, just one subnet per line on a plain text file. It'll fill in these same subnets just like this. Active Directory, you can add multiple Active Directory domain controllers if you need any sort of fallback, if you need a secondary domain controller, if there's any sort of issues with the primary. We can still inventory the same data from the secondary if needed. Otherwise, you can add these with a file as well. Inventory scope, this will just cover Windows inventory, so you have your main protocols, this should all be turned on by default. Your Linux inventory will use SSH. And then VMware, you can add your VMware hosts by IP here, and then you can add the credentials in the credentials section here. If you don't want to record resource consumption, you can always disable those two options here. This will basically record the RAM CPU disk usage every couple hours from each machine that's inventoried. And if we're doing any sort of dynamics inventory, we can enter those details in this section here. Credential-wise, you'll have all your credentials listed here from your setup process, whether that was custom or the simple setup. And if you need to add any other credentials, you can add as many credentials as you need. So you can add Windows, Linux, virtual infrastructure, your 365, Entra ID, Azure, AWS collection. You can add as many Linux credentials, as many Windows credentials, as many virtual infrastructure credentials as you need. If your Windows credentials are a local account, you can leave the domain blank and just add a local account. It will give you an orange remark in terms of the validation, but that's okay. It's because it's a local account, it's not going to validate against the domain controller. So as long as you know that the credentials are correct, you don't have to worry about it not validating. So I'll just add one here as an example. Just so you can see, any local account will come up with this unable to validate, which is perfectly fine because it's not supposed to work on the domain controller. If there's a device out there that takes this credential, as long as it's in here, it should be able to utilize it when it gets to that step of inventorying that endpoint. But that should cover everything in terms of the Windows application.